Now, Norman, welcome to the programme. We've had this conversation so many times. You've been campaigning tirelessly on this for 20 years. You've served in the front line. You've been stabbed yourself. You know how this works. Do you think, Norman Brennan, we're at a point now, knife crime is so commonplace, it barely even makes the news, and that this week something extraordinary seems to have happened. 3 dead children in Southport. Lawlessness on the streets of Southend, and you report all the time so many stabbings in London, it barely raises a flicker. I think it's time to declare some kind of national knife crime emergency. Norman, do you agree? And if so, how would that work?
Yeah, good afternoon, Martin. Absolutely. You're right. I look very tired. I'm worn out. It's been more than 20 years. It's 30 plus years, 15 while a serving officer, 15 while retired. I've never given up. Knife crime in Britain is a cancer. You just showed the Evening Standard headline there. I warned Tony Blair that unless his government, and that was Labour at the time, acted, not just listened, there would be an epidemic coming. We're talking about an epidemic. It's a cancer, it's an epidemic, and you rightly highlight it's a national emergency. And if I was to describe it in medical terms, we're on life support. In the past decade, knife crime in Britain has gone up by over 80%. In the last year alone, in the City of London, 88%. In London, just this last year alone, 20%. It's about 60, 70% over the last 5 or 6 years. At what figure do we have to reach where 3 years ago in London, for example, we had the highest child homicide rate on record, 27. That means that over the past decade, Martin, 200 or 300 parents have been planning funerals instead of bright futures. We need a major consensus. The government, the criminal justice system, the police, the public, and the communities. Nobody ever seems to get together. Everybody blames each other. And what we do, and it's far past time, and this government are not looking at it, we need a mandatory prison sentence of 5 years for anyone carrying a knife on the streets without lawful authority or reasonable excuse. And maybe if you're a juvenile, 3 years. You're more likely, Martin, to be stabbed to death 3 times more than if you were shot to death. Yet if you carry a firearm, you get a minimum of 5 years imprisonment. And even today, if you carry a knife, which is as lethal as a firearm, it may be as low as a parking fine or a conditional discharge. What message does that send out?
Well, it sends out a message that there is absolutely no deterrent. The first question people will raise there, Norman Brennan, as well, we've only got 700 places left in the British jail system anyway. We're going to need to build more jails. But Norman Brennan, we seem to be able to house asylum seekers. We seem to be able to launch plans to convert RF Wethersfield or Scampton into asylum seeker centres. Sir Keir Starmer was talking about making those into new mega jails. Great idea. Why don't we make them into mega jails for knife offenders and just get these yobbos off the streets?
I think the government have got to ask themselves this question. At what price or what value do they put on the life of children and innocent victims that are murdered daily? In the last 24 hours, there's been 17 stabbings. In Stoke Newington, the latest stabbing murder, a man in his 30s. I've just been texted 4 minutes ago, another stabbing in Bournemouth. Last night, there was madness with machetes in Southend. Last night, or the night before last, a man was attacked by somebody with a knife in a park in Ipswich. It's not life-threatening, but it's life-changing. Life-changing needs to happen today on knife crime. We can't make any excuses. And unless this government get their act together, and I've seen nothing in their manifesto that reassures me to reassure the public and victims of crime that this government have got any idea of taking knife crime seriously. It's no good, Martin, giving somebody a football and saying, have a kick around. Let's sit down round a table. Let me tell you how bad it is. And I know we're sort of caught for time, Martin. 4,000 gangs in Britain. 4,000, 200 in London. They number from 12 to 50. Nearly every single one of those will be carrying a knife. How does the government expect to address them We don't have the police. We need at least another 18,000 police officers just to keep up with the population growth. What's the answer? What's the solution? Well, 5 years, mandatory prison sentences. If the government can't do that, it means they have no interest. They have no interest in spending money. And they've got to ask themselves, what is more serious to them, saving lives or ensuring that lives are saved by actually sending more people to prison in the short term? Mass stop and search. We haven't got the officers. In the last 6 years, stop and search has gone down from 1.5 million to 500,000. Personal and parental responsibility. Why not stick the parents in the dock with their children? Let's find out where they're going wrong. Let's find the solutions. Mentors. Let's get mentors. And let's make sure that parental and personal responsibility is there. And more importantly, and as importantly, Martin, a national education program. Get the police into schools, into the communities, talk to them. We're actually their friends. And whilst they think that we're our enemy, the higher the crime goes up and the less that they see police on the streets, the more children and young men in particular will slip a knife into their pocket, Martin, as routinely as their mobile phone. That cannot be right.
Norman Brennan, you're speaking so much common sense. I'm actually getting quite emotional. If only we had people in power like you talking sense to the Home Secretary. Instead, you'd have seen last night, terrible scenes where coppers being pelted by communities at boiling point because these things aren't getting sorted out on the streets. We're not having the crackdown. We're not having the violence reduction units. We're not having the stop and search. We're not seeing these harsh sentences. The crowds are running wild. The obbos are running the streets. Innocent children are being stabbed to death in school events. It feels to me, Norman Brennan, like we're at boiling point and something needs to be done very, very quickly. Quick final word to you, Norman. Go on.
Martin, this government seemed to find £9 million a day to house asylum seekers. If the government gave me £1 million, even if it was 100,000 to start off with, do you know what? I could get a most formidable team together. And all the threads around Britain where nobody knows where they're going, I could get a team together and I would dedicate my life, as I do at the moment, to pull all those threads together. And slowly but surely, we will take knives off the streets. We will stop sending children and young adults to prison, and we will give them something more worthwhile to do. And while they have no value of life, they have no qualms of taking somebody else's life and loses theirs. That's a damning indictment on Britain's criminal justice system in 2024.
You know what, Norman Brennan, I think we've got to try and make something happen with this, mate. Let's take this offline after this and let's try and get something going. I know a few people, you know a few people. We've got to try and do something about this, mate, because how many more times are we going to have this conversation, Norman Brennan, before so many more young lives, so many lives are tragically lost on our streets, as you say, to the cancer of knife crime. Norman Brennan, you're an inspiring character. Thanks for joining us on the show. Let's